Jeff, why do you teach writing?
I've been fascinated with the technique of writing ever since I got into it. It was, well, really it started in prep school when I had 3 good English teachers in a row, and I always responded in a course if I liked the teacher. If I didn't like the teacher, I wouldn't perform. If I did, I would go for it. And we had these, one teacher was a Scottish fellow who spent 3 months reading Macbeth to us and translated it all and translated the ambient world of Shakespeare to help make more sense of it. And he would read a few lines of Macbeth and then talk for 45 minutes about what was going on, and end up at the end of that talk about how in the Old West, the idea that you could pull out your revolver and shoot somebody's gun out of their hand, he said that's so unrealistic because you could put one of those pistols in a vise and never hit the same spot twice. So that would be like just the level of, interesting material that I was being exposed to, and I learned how to write essays and stuff like that, so that when I ran into a fellow in Vermont who was a playwright and he offered to teach a friend of mine playwriting, I asked if I could jump in on that. He taught us the basics of Aristotle, and he gave us these 2 books to read, and I sat down and read them for 3 years. Pretty much all I did. Trying to, at first, because I was a painter before that, so I come into playwriting knowing nothing and knowing that I knew nothing. So it makes it easier to learn if you don't already think you know it. And this fellow, William Thompson Price, was a script doctor to Broadway producers around 1910. He helped revise every play that this producer, David Belasco, produced on Broadway. He's quite famous. And so many people were coming to him asking for help with their scripts and with the tools he created for playwriting technique that he started the first school of playwriting ever. And he had 28 students, 24 of them had hits on Broadway. And he wrote this one book in 1908, which is the one I sat down and started reading. At first, I couldn't understand it. It was really dense and complex, but I kept working my way through it. And he kept checking in as a teacher saying, you have to understand what I just explained, otherwise you should just forget the whole thing, because this is key. So, and I would stop, and he'd go, stop and think about it and see if you understand it. And at first I was like, I really don't understand it at all. So I go back and reread it, and I still didn't understand it, because it's like when Einstein said when he first started studying theoretical physics, the stuff that he specialized in, he was stupefied by it for the first 2 years. It was so complex that he was stupefied by it. This material is obviously, way easier than that, but the degree of complexity was still a lot for me. And so I read Price's book and then his student's book, and then I read Price's book again and his student's book again. And after a while, I got to where I was understanding what they were talking about, but felt like I still couldn't use it. And so when I started teaching people, I did hands-on training. I did small groups, maximum 6 people. Each person had to bring their own story that they were working on, so I could get them actually using the tool instead of them just listening to me talk about it. Because I understood that you could get to a place where you understand it and still not be able to actually use it. So that's why I would work hands-on with each person in the group. And just the science of it and the art of it has always been fascinating. And it's just something that people have responded well to the know-how that I was giving them, and it was stimulating and interesting. So I've just remained fascinated by it.
Have you ever thought back to, with those 3 teachers, had they been teachers that maybe you didn't necessarily want to perform for or impress or have like your work, the trajectory of what your life would have been?
Yeah, no, I wouldn't have been fascinated with writing. I don't think it ever would have come up. I mean, I love to read and I love movies and plays and great novels and that kind of thing, but as something that I felt strongly compelled to dive into and gain a mastery of, I don't know if it would have been there.
How important is it for you to have students feel similar? Maybe you can disagree on many things, but at least they want to do well for you. How important is that, and how does one establish that?
I'm not entirely sure, partly because by the time they seek out someone like me, they already have some kind of passion for the material. Now, I may awaken in them a deeper passion as they see that there's more perhaps than they thought there was to learn, and that because the way in which I teach is scientific in its own way, because each of the tools has certain distinctions. Like, to use the tool properly, you have to be able to make certain distinctions. For instance, like in dilemma, consists of 2 equally unacceptable alternatives. So there's real distinctions in that. So it's two painful choices, and for it to be a real dilemma, they have to be equally unacceptable. Because if you could have 2 unacceptable choices, where do you want to get burned by a match or do you want to jump in the lava? Those are both unacceptable, but they're nowhere near equal. But if you have to choose between, sacrificing your husband or your son to, like, a slave owner who's going to take one or the other, that when they're equal and of magnitude, then it really paralyzes the protagonist and renders the material riveting to the audience. So the distinctions are key for using the tools properly. And so once a student sees that there's a real specificity to the use of these tools, and if you use them properly and fully, you can get tremendous power, especially out of a story that has promise but has not been performing for them. So that the ability to, it's kind of like being a martial arts teacher from one point of view, where somebody may have some fighting skills, but you're able to go, look, you keep your elbow up, and they can, there's certain technical things that you can show them that you can turn them into a considerably better fighter pretty quickly if they already have some basic skills by key distinctions and observation and just know-how. So that it's a process of giving students genuine know-how. And once they see that they really could master this stuff if they apply themselves, and they've seen their script improve a lot from working hands-on with me in the class, that can really give them a fire in the belly, because whereas before they just wanted to write stories, now they understand the distinction between a storyteller and a dramatist, and that if you're going to adapt a story for a theatrical presentation, whether that's a film, TV show, theater, that the story has to be stage-worthy. It has to be able to be performed by an actor in such a way that it grips the audience. So there's a lot of specificity to making a theatrical presentation of a story work in such a way that it really grips an audience. And once they get a handle on, this is considerably different than what I thought it was, and that's only true for some people. Some people come in with a lot of knowledge already, and I'm just showing them a few more tools. But the tools are powerful enough that they can see that if they really apply themselves and learn to use them fully and properly, that their scripts will tend to work. And so that can really amplify somebody's passion.